Hello and welcome people to the next episode of Koudelka, in which we will turn back and get the thing I forgot to collect after the last boss fight against that lady in the lovely durable dress, which apparently was popular around 30 years ago. In this episode I would like to talk about the backstory of this game because I think it is a pretty interesting story in on its own. This game was made by a man called uh, Hiroki Kikuta. He used to be a composer for Squaresoft back in the early 90s. He began his career with making the soundtrack for Secret of Mana. However, as the years went by, he grew somewhat displeased with how the JRPG genre was being handled, becoming more juvenile as the time went on, and also not really going anywhere with newer settings or anything like it. It was either medieval fantasy or futuristic medieval fantasy. He also felt especially the Final Fantasy series really wasn't going anywhere. However, on his position in Squaresoft, he was not capable of doing any difference when it comes to that. He was simply in no position to do that as a simple composer. Ideally, he wanted to make a game in which he would be responsible for most, if not all, of its aspects. And so his ambition has driven him into making his own company with the help of and funding of SNK. How he achieved it was basically by meeting with the CEO of SNK at that time and explaining his views on the current state of affairs in the JRPG genre and how he imagines it being handled better. And I will continue this story right after this cutscene.
Hey. Hey. Wait a minute. Hey.
Edward.
You should have just died before. I wanted you to lay down and die.
A ghost?
He assumed the position of the CEO of Saknov, and on top of that, he also decided to manage basically every aspect of Koudelka. He was responsible for, among other things, composition, arrangement, concept design, game planning, scenario writing, production, direction of cutscenes, both the FMVs and also the mocap in-engine ones. And yeah, you can't really find too much more info on that. The only the only thing that he wasn't responsible for is the battle system and how the game plays. Because as you've seen so far, the battle system isn't exactly very good. It's neither optimized or very deep. This is because it was really half-assed. Not because the people decided that it would... they didn't want to put any effort into it, but because the team that was responsible for the gameplay simply had another idea. Practically all of the people who worked at Soknov at the time were ex-Squaresoft workers. Their idea was that they are going to make a game sort of like, well, what it is, a turn-based game, what they were used to making at Squaresoft, with a few exceptions. And whereas Kikuta had the idea that it was going to play like a Resident Evil game, which yeah, you could I could imagine it being like this. So what he essentially wanted it to be was Parasite Eve in more gothic setting. In the end, he didn't manage to get his vision across, and we're fighting our shadows. They have very similar abilities to our people, except that James is a lot more potent with his spells. But this is just as much as you really need to know about this fight. Let's go back to the story. So how it ended up being was the game really shines on one end and kind of really sucks on the other. Kikuta was really putting all of his efforts into it too, because not only did he do all of the things mentioned above, but he was also the CEO of Saknov at the same time. So he worked more than full time on it. On top of that, he really believed in this concept. In order to, because during the development and creation state of this game, he went around Europe. He went to London and Wales, where this game actually takes place in Wales. And took inspiration from the areas, took a lot of pictures. He read a lot of books by many Western writers, among other, and also took inspiration from many films that talked about this time period. Like, for example, what was the name of the movie? The Rule of Rose, I believe. Or By the Name of the Rose. Yes, that was the name. By the Name of the Rose. He also got inspiration from Lovecraft, but honestly, who didn't? And as you've seen thus far, the game has a very unique, very mature atmosphere to it. It's not silly like Resident Evil, and also it deals with some rather serious and mature subjects. Also, this game is very much feels like a Western type fantasy, by which I don't mean it is like Skyrim or Witcher. I mean it more like it combines the storytelling elements of a JRPG, the focus on storytelling, with Western type setting, and it does it well because it doesn't just outright say Japan all over it like it is with many games of this sort. While it may be enjoyable at times, it is very commendable that he was actually able to learn about all of these themes and settings and actually apply them to the point where it is you basically don't get the idea that it was made by a Japanese person. Also, all of the names of the characters in the game and names of places or certain terms are all taken from the historical figures and terms in mythology and stuff like that. Like, for example, Nemeton Monastery. The word Nemeton actually refers to a very important spiritual place in Celtic religion or setting or whatever. I'm not gonna pretend I know all of this stuff. I really won't. However, when it comes to the names of the characters, I will not say anything about them, simply because they all contain spoilers to a certain degree, and I would hate doing that. But that enough should be enough reason to see how much work he put into it. That if you actually look up the names of the characters and the respective historical figures, which you can do on the wiki of this game, It's actually fairly competent when it comes to that. You can actually get the idea of who they are too early. So I'm not gonna talk anything about it anymore. But yeah, you can, since you've never heard of this game, or most people just didn't hear of this game, you can imagine that this was a commercial failure. First and foremost, this was released in 1999, at the point where basically nobody cared about PlayStation games anymore. They were all waiting for the release of the new PlayStation 2, or they, for some random ass reason, got a Dreamcast. So this was just ancient history by the time it was released. The graphics don't look that impressive. And on top of that, the battle system has been done so much better, even on things like the Super NES. So it just gives you a really bad bad first impression. It didn't score very well in any of the magazines. Most people just praised every aspect of it, besides the gameplay. And when the gameplay is bad, basically nobody is really gonna care. And to be honest, it is a valid point. On top of that, people weren't so big on dark fantasy back then as they are apparently right now, for some reason. It just wasn't meant to be at that time. I believe if something like this was released nowadays, it would have gotten much more attention. Maybe if it was released in the form of, well, I don't know, one of them RPG Maker adventures, or maybe something slightly more advanced, then maybe it would have done a much better job when it comes to the sales. But in any case, because of this commercial failure, Kikuta decided to just give up on the position of the CEO. They didn't close the company. They made games afterwards, and they were pretty damn awesome. But he decided that he just isn't good for the position, and he cannot get his idea through, or that his idea just doesn't interest people. So he got discouraged, and he didn't give up on the industry. He's still sort of active, but he never done anything other than music since then, which is really, really sad. I would have loved to see a game that he directed, but with a more competent battle system. But enough about that. If you're interested in further story of Koudelka, there is actually a manga they made, which is essentially a continuation to, I believe, the non-canon ending of this game. I am not quite certain on that actually, but what is important about it, it is actually non-canon to the sequel of this game, and it actually contradicts the canon of that game, which is actually pretty hilarious. I would recommend checking it out after learning all of the events from this game, because that one essentially delves more into the main character's backstory and things like that, and you wouldn't want to have it spoiled for you beforehand. And we beat the fight. Yay! And I finished the backstory. I may mention a couple more things about it, but for now I think I'm done. So let's just make our characters more like they are supposed to be by the end of this game, and proceed with the plot. Intelligence, and we get a couple more things. Icon earring. We already got a couple items similar to this one. They're going to, of course, come in handy with some sort of arbitrary puzzle. But thankfully in this game you don't really need to backtrack practically at all. That's very nice. And here we cut out another save point. And this is actually kind of dickish because there is a save point and you're not actually quite sure if you can go even further beyond, because how the save points work, you just approach them and they just kind of sort of work, or in this case you just need to approach them even further and press X, which is a little bit weird. And this is the code to the chest I opened earlier. I just remembered it for some reason. I will show what it contains at the end of this video. And there is another cutscene coming up, so I shut up.
Did you see all those bodies? Be quite a party if they were alive.
They've probably been abandoned for hundreds of years. Must be some fascinating old stories.
I saw some pretty fresh ones, too. One who was shot, one who'd been cracked in the head with an axe, and some with no visible signs of injury. They must have been poisoned.
I bet the new ones were fortune seekers like us. That old couple must
You mean to tell me they killed all those people? Rubbish!
All those deaths are rubbish?
They're all liars and thieves anyway. This is still a monastery. This is still God's house, prison or no. Why all those liars and heathens are killed is none of my concern.
How could you possibly say a thing like that? That doesn't sound very priestly.
I am not a priest. I am a bishop.
I don't give a rat's ass what you are. Look, I'm not saying that all of those people were saints, okay? But that doesn't mean that they should be put to death.
You saw that old couple. They're so well-mannered, kind. You think they're killers?
Good manners?
Yes.
Think about it! Why would they leave the place such a mess?
I don't know.
You think they'd at least bury the bodies?
Possibly.
Anyway, I have this strange feeling we're not alone with all these bodies and ghosts. You'd better keep your mouth shut. If you want to live.
Well, the only thing I can do at this point is say goodbye and see you on the disc too. Bye bye.
Koudelka, did you find anything?
No, nothing. But